This video is sponsored by Aura. If you've ever experienced identity theft, think about what happened and how it impacted you. What did you learn from the experience, and what steps did you take to recover? Sharing your story can help others understand the importance of protecting their identity and inspire them to take action with Aura and their different features to avoid a similar situation. Data broker opt-out, identity theft protection, financial fraud protection, certified data security and privacy, VPN, antivirus, password manager, and 24/7 US-based support. Don't leave yourself open to hackers and scammers. Go to aura.com/KrystlynCrime to get your 14-day free trial. Thanks again to Aura for sponsoring this video. Madge Oberholtzer lived a quiet, ordinary life. Raised in the tree-lined neighborhood of Irvington, just outside downtown Indianapolis, she was the daughter of German-American parents. Her father worked as a postal clerk, and the family attended the local Methodist church. By all accounts, Madge was thoughtful, intelligent, and reserved, the kind of young woman more interested in books than politics, more at ease in a library than a crowd. She studied English, mathematics, zoology, and logic at Butler College, but something changed during her junior year. Without explanation, she dropped out. She returned home and resumed life in Irvington, still living with her parents. But Madge hadn't lost her drive. By her late 20s, she had become the manager of the Indiana Young People's Reading Circle, a literacy initiative under the state's Department of Public Instruction. It was meaningful work, a chance to shape the intellectual lives of Indiana's children, but one vulnerable to the winds of budget cuts and political agendas. By the mid-1920s, the Ku Klux Klan had taken hold of the state. Under the leadership of D.C. Stevenson, the Indiana Klan had grown into a political machine. Stevenson styled himself not just as a grand dragon, but as a kingmaker, a man with influence over governors, lawmakers, and educators. He was charismatic, ambitious, and terrifyingly effective. When Madge met Stevenson, it was under the pretense of educational reform. He had taken an interest in the reading circle. Madge, always professional, agreed to meet with him, perhaps hoping to protect her program. But Stevenson's intentions were not political. They were predatory. On the night of March 15, 1925, he invited Madge to his mansion under the ruse of discussing her work. Madge was coerced into accompanying Stephen on a private train to Chicago. There, she was drugged, held captive, and repeatedly assaulted by Stevenson in his private rail car and later in a rented home in Hammond. She attempted to end her life by ingesting poison, hoping to escape the torture. Instead, she lingered for days, suffering from both her injuries and a spreading infection. When she was finally returned home, bruised and near death, nothing could be done. From her deathbed, Madge dictated a 17-page statement to a stenographer, recounting every detail of her abduction, assault, and captivity. Her words were calm, clear, and damning. On April 14, 1925, Madge Oberholtzer died of sepsis. She was 28 years old. Her statement was leaked to the press, and the public's reaction was swift and explosive. The image of Stevenson as a respectable leader, a man who claimed to uphold morality and patriotism, collapsed overnight. He was arrested, charged, and eventually convicted of second-degree murder, thanks to Madge's dying testimony. The fallout was unprecedented. Members in the Indiana Klan plummeted. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves. Within a year, one of the most powerful branches of the Ku Klux Klan in the country lay in ruins. On the morning of November 27, 1925, the Snow family farm outside Stephenville, Texas, looked like any other rural homestead. Quiet, wind-stirred, and surrounded by fields of cotton. But by nightfall, the land would hold a grim secret. A scene of horror that would shock the small farming community and leave 3 members of a single family brutally murdered. Francis Snow, a 44-year-old farmer, was known to neighbors as temperamental but hard-working. That day, an argument broke out between him and his wife Maggie Snow. The cause seemed minor at first. She had accidentally let some of the livestock loose into the cotton patch. But what began as a domestic dispute quickly escalated into something far darker. Consumed by rage, Snow bludgeoned Maggie to death with a wooden club. Not long after, he turned his fury on Maggie's mother, 74-year-old Samantha Ann Olds. Deaf and blind, Olds couldn't have known the danger she was in. Snow picked up an axe and killed her where she stood. With 2 bodies in the house, Snow set about covering his tracks. He dragged the corpses out of sight and hitched up his buggy. His next target was 19-year-old Bernard Connolly, his stepson. Bernard had gone into Stephenville earlier that day to deliver a load of firewood. When Snow found him, he told the boy a lie, that Maggie had taken ill and wanted him to come home right away. The two rode back to the farmhouse together. As they reached the property, with no chance to react, Bernard was gunned down. Snow raised his Winchester rifle and shot the teenager twice in the back, killing him instantly. Snow returned to the house, where he dismembered both Maggie and Samantha with the same axe he had used earlier, feeding their remains into the fireplace. He then stripped Bernard's body of clothing, except for his underwear, and took it to a remote area in Cedar Point. There, with chilling precision, he decapitated the young man. Later that evening, Snow placed Bernard's severed head into a sack and left it in the cellar of an abandoned farmhouse in rural Erith County. The details of the day would come out slowly, piece by piece, as investigators began to unravel the horror. The brutality, the premeditation, and the sheer coldness of the acts committed by Francis Snow turned a domestic dispute into one of the most shocking crimes in Texas history. When Francis Snow extinguished the last embers in his fireplace that November evening, he may have believed his crimes would remain hidden beneath ash and silence. But in a tight-knit community like Stephenville, disappearance doesn't go unnoticed, especially not a sudden vanishing of 3 people from the same household. It didn't take long for suspicion to grow. Bernard Connolly had been expected back in town after his delivery, but never returned. Maggie Snow and Samantha Olds, typically seen working around the property or socializing with neighbors, were suddenly nowhere to be found. Friends and family raised concerns, prompting local law enforcement to pay a visit to the Snow farm. Investigators discovered disturbing evidence of a violent struggle, bloodstains, and partially burned remains in the fireplace. Snow's story quickly unraveled. Under pressure, he confessed to the killings, though his explanations shifted from blaming Maggie for provoking him to vague claims of losing control. But the physical evidence, combined with his admission, left little room for doubt. Authorities eventually located Bernard Connolly's body at Cedar Point, headless and partially stripped. Not long after, they found his severed head in a cellar miles away, stuffed in a sack. The methodical nature of the killings and the attempts to destroy or hide the remains shocked even seasoned lawmen. Snow was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder. During his trial, held in early 1926, the courtroom was packed with locals, desperate to understand how such unimaginable violence could erupt within their own community. Prosecutors painted Snow as cold-blooded, methodical, and dangerous. A man who murdered his wife, mother-in-law, and stepson in a single day, then attempted to erase all traces of their existence. The defense offered little in the way of mitigation. There were no claims of insanity, and no compelling backstory to soften the brutal facts. Snow's actions spoke for themselves. It took the jury only a short time to reach a verdict, guilty on all counts. Francis Snow was sentenced to death. On a quiet morning, not long after his conviction, Snow met his end at the gallows.